2.5 times the size that it is today. With a teeming population of 1.4 million and growing at a rate of 22.5%, with roughly 290,000 new residents entering Dubai every year, the city faces a huge space crunch. It's the main reason why it is today engaged in a building boom of epic proportions. A skyscraper in a place like this may be a rational response to maximize the use of available land. But it may also be an expression of daring to challenge not just gravity, but also other similar structures to go further. Burj, tower in Arabic, the newest sensation in town, has reached an iconic status. At 710 meters and aiming to go further, it's already the world's tallest man-made structure. A silvery pinnacle, Burj Dubai is a cluster of stair-stepped steel and glass cylinders that fall away as the central spire reaches into the clouds. With 7,500 skilled workers employed in the construction, the tower has been designed to be the centerpiece of a large-scale mixed-use development that will include hotels, residential towers, and a man-made Burj Dubai Lake.
Part of the vision and for Dubai is to create an icon, a landmark. It's just a part of the whole downtown district. The whole district will have about 30,000 homes, and we are investing about $20 billion US. But the tower is really the centerpiece that anchors the whole downtown area and gives it a very unique identity.
But apart from the grandeur it adds to the city's skyline, the challenges that come with a skyscraper design are considered among the most complex ever encountered. For instance, the load a skyscraper experiences is largely from the force of the building material itself. So how does the building hold up? How is it able to withstand the gravitational pull? The tower has a strong foundation, a base floor plate of 33,000 square feet, which tapers at the top. Wind pressure increases with height. For a building of this height and slenderness, wind loading would be the most important factor impacting structural design. This explains the Y shape of the Burj Tower, which tapers as it rises skywards in order to reduce the wind forces on the structure.
As far as the massing of the tower goes, one of the greatest engineering challenges is actually an architectural and an engineering challenge. And so if you look at the model here, you'll notice it has a stepping all the way up. And this stepping actually has a logic to it. The stepping occurs in a spiral fashion as it goes up the tower. And this is for a reason, because if you had a cylindrical or a square-shaped structure, it would move a lot. So in this sense, the massing and the architectural massing and the structure work together in the same way to provide a very stable structure that's a self-damping structure. It doesn't move, it doesn't get excited as much. And that's very important because the comfort of the occupants is improved and increased.
The advantage of stepping and shaping is to confuse the wind. The wind vortexes never get organized because at each new tier they encounter a different building shape. Wind forces acting on the building are one thing. Super tall buildings have historically been termed wind generators, as they tend to create microclimatic zones at the base. This is because they induce downdrafts, which become horizontal winds at the tower's base, making it uncomfortable for pedestrians walking by.
And because of the downdraft situation, if you have a terrace on the tip of the tower, there is a downdraft. So we've come up with these sort of trellis creations. And the trellis sits in the middle of your terrace and provides a shield to deflect downdrafts from the occupants who are using the terrace. So you're protected from that direct blast downwards. In addition, around the terraces, we have a very high screen that screens the wind. And what it's proven in these types of comfort studies is that the wind will tend to work its way over the glass screens, which you can see through and enjoy the view. But the wind works its way over, and it doesn't come back down until it's much further into the leeward direction of the people on the terrace.
The downdrafts are also mitigated by the appropriate use of podiums and local shielding like trees, so wind is deflected away from the base. It's not just enough to come up with a near-perfect design for a tall structure. What is even more important is to decide what material should be used to build it. Concrete is one crucial ingredient of modern construction. It not only sets quickly, but also resists corrosion and is durable. The primary structural system of Burj Dubai is reinforced concrete. Over 58,900 cubic yards of concrete, weighing more than 110,000 tons, were used to construct the concrete and steel foundation, which is more than 164 feet deep.
Concrete is very much used in this part of the world. It's a material that's a little bit easier to work with without having too much fabrication technology. So the concrete has a lot of virtues in the structural sense. The concrete and the weight of the structure helps dampen the structure. It keeps it from moving. It's not as lively a structure if it's concrete. Steel is lighter, so it would probably be a little more lively and harder to control in that sense.
Good structural design is of utmost importance in the building of a skyscraper of this proportion. And the use of appropriate building material goes with it. But does the context of the Burj being located in Dubai have anything to do with its design?
We took some of the inspiration from traditional Islamic geometries. Islamic architecture uses a lot of geometrical themes and a lot of curved elements. So if you look at the domes of minarets and the geometrical patterns, we've interpolated these into the way that the plan is worked out.
The onion domes, pointed arches, and spiral imagery in Middle Eastern architecture find expression in the Burj. But the use of the structure of an indigenous desert flower, Hymenocallis, in the tower's design is sheer creative genius. The central structure of the flower and surrounding petals inspired the triaxial geometry of the Burj, which is basically composed of 3 wings around a central core referred to as the buttressed core. As the tower rises, the wings set back in a spiral system until it reaches the central shaft. At the top, the shaft peels away to reveal the single spire. If the traditional could inform the modern, what could be better than looking for a parallel for a traditional piece of Islamic architecture in the ancient 12th century Indian subcontinent? Here's a monumental piece, the world's tallest freestanding stone tower, and a design marvel. Every century witnesses the birth of genius. Every era has its heroes, its stars, and its very own share of awe-inspiring structures that defy the tests of time. Here's a 12th century marvel, Delhi's Qutb Minar. At 239 feet, it's the world's tallest stone tower of victory. What is remarkable is not how tall the Qutb Minar is, but rather how, more than 800 years ago, these men dreamt of reaching for the stars. They had no sophisticated technology to help them build. Qutb is Arabic for axis. One of the key organizing elements of the Qutb Minar is the central axis itself. The structure of the tower unfurls like a flower, with each story marked by a projecting circular balcony. The monument tapers from a base that is 15 meters in diameter to just 2.5 meters at the top.
It is one of the most outstanding structures in Delhi. In fact, if I may say that Delhi is identified by the Qutb Minar itself, notwithstanding the fact that there are a very large number of monuments in Delhi.
Qutb Minar represents the finest Islamic structure ever raised in India. It is made of red and buff sandstone. All the 5 stories are heavily indented with different styles of fluting. The construction began in 1198 AD by Mughal conqueror Qutbuddin Aybak and completed by his successors over a period of 150 years.
As you can see that this minar is not simple vertical tower straight all over from having the same diameter from bottom to the top. It is tapering. It is because of definitely because of certainly because of the engineering factors, because a tower of this height would naturally not be able to stand on its own.
Qutb Minar could have taken the usual role of a minaret for muezzin's call for prayer, as is in Islamic practice. It could also have been a tower of victory, a monument signifying the might of Islam, or a watchtower for defense. The top of the minar was used by Khilji and Tughlaq kings in the 12th and 13th centuries to watch the wild Mongol hordes when they threatened Delhi. The minar, apart from being a marvel in itself, was the first monument of Muslim rule in India, heralding the beginning of a new style of art and architecture that came to be known as the Indo-Islamic style.
This is the first symbol of Indo-Islamic architecture because of its grandeur, its height, its visibility and its connection with a mosque. But the fact that this is part of the mosque itself symbolizes the presence of Islam.
But the question is, what inspired the Qutb Minar? It was the same ambition and the same dream of surpassing another that the Burj architects had. Qutbuddin Aybak was inspired by the minaret of Jam in Afghanistan and, wishing to surpass it, commenced construction of Qutb Minar. Between 1163 and 1368 AD, the different stories were added. The various architectural styles are quite evident in the minaret.
No, the challenges were of a different kind, because when the Muslims came here and they started their building activity here, they did not bring with them their own artisans. They used the local Hindu artisans, Hindu or Jain or whosoever, the local artisans. And they were having their own system. The greatest challenge was how to harness those artisans for erecting these buildings, and one of which was this huge tower. The other one was about the materials. One of the questions that arises was, how was this material taken to this height? There must have been a ramp which must have been created for carting the stone, for taking the stone right up to the height of the Qutb Minar.
Each story has a different design theme. The balconies on each story are supported on elaborately carved and inscribed stalactite-like brackets, or muqarnas. Patterned with honeycombing, these are the structural elements which support the weight of the projecting balconies. Beautiful calligraphy adorns the edifices. The inscriptions on the minar consist of Quranic verses and an account of the construction of the minaret, including its repairs. They also serve political intents, declaring the greatness of the rulers involved in its construction. True to Islamic architecture, The tower is decorated with floral motifs and Persian arabesque. The ground plan of Qutb Minar reveals a triaxial floral pattern. Structured around a central core or axis, each story opens out onto a balcony like a flower and tapers towards the top. This provides the structure maximum support to withstand wind forces. Qutb's base plan has a striking resemblance to that of the modern 21st century design marvel that uses the triaxial geometry of a desert flower. This time only taking it to more complex levels. Organized around a central core, Burj Dubai stands majestically with its silver spire reaching into the clouds. Construction work is in full swing at downtown Burj Dubai. Already the world's tallest tower, it will be Dubai's new icon. Burj Dubai takes on a shimmering glass facade. Made of high-performance materials, the curtain wall enhances the building's distinctive appearance and seals the interior from external heat, wind, and noise.
Now, one of the most important things is the glass, because in the Middle East, you have a huge solar load. So we looked and came up with a special assembly of glass that satisfies all the aspirations of what a piece of glass has to do for this building. We want lots of daylight because the occupants want to have bright light coming in and plenty of light, but we don't really want the solar radiant heat to come through. So we chose a special glass that has a coating, a very thin metallic coating that you can actually see through, and but this coating reflects a lot of the solar heat.
The total area of cladding will be equivalent to 17 football fields. The facade is designed as a factory-assembled panelized system, ensuring the units are put together with a high degree of accuracy and consistency. Each panel is factory glazed, sealed, and prepared for site installation. With the building going up to a height of 800 meters or more, with a large volume of traffic, there is the challenge of transporting people up and down. A single elevator wouldn't just do for this. What's required is a double-deck elevator. Double-deck elevators are designed with 2 elevator cars, which are attached one on top of the other.
If every lift had to serve all the way up the core at whatever level they wanted, and you had dedicated lift shafts, you couldn't get all the lifts in the building. There are about 60 lifts, and they just wouldn't fit. That a double-deck lift would function to serve 2 purposes. There's an observatory on the 124th floor. So if you get into the double-deck cab, if you're in the bottom, your destination is the observatory. If you're in the top cab, your destination is the office sky lobby. So it gives separate functions to a lift cab that's linked as 2 cars. And they go up and down on a regular interval, but they're servicing completely different zones in the building.
With each new day, history continues to rise in downtown Burj Dubai, altering Dubai's skyline dramatically and symbolizing the inherent spirit of this city.
I think what the Burj is standing for is it's become a symbol of what Dubai is aspiring to be, and very much what the Gulf is aspiring to be and what to do. So we're very, very proud that it's become this, this icon for the region and a fulfillment of what Dubai wants to become.
Great architecture lives beyond its time. Qutb Minar, built more than 800 years ago, stands as testimony to this. Burj Dubai, a modern engineering marvel, combines the slimness of a needle with the layered look of an abstracted desert flower. It's a creative synthesis of the old and new, presenting an ultra-chic Dubai within the cultural context of Arabia. Water takes up 2/3 of the Earth's surface. 75% of the human body is water. Transporting, dissolving, replenishing. It is essential to life on Earth. And since antiquity, water has served as a symbol by which man expresses devotion and purity. In the capital of 3 empires, a hidden treasure once lay forgotten beneath the city streets. Some of its secrets still obscured by the mists of time. A modern metropolis under pressure from an increasing population. Stuck in a conundrum. How to provide enough water with no hinterland to speak of. A marvel of construction from the past and a creative feat of engineering for the future. Both an answer to perhaps man's oldest quest, water. With a population exceeding 4.4 million, Singapore sits on just 700 square kilometers of land. At 1.4 billion liters per day, water consumption here is comparable to levels seen in Europe and North America. Professor Asit Biswas has spent years studying Singapore's water management strategy.
So 20-30 years ago, Singapore's water management, water supply and wastewater treatment was as bad as any average developing country. But when you look back what Singapore has achieved, especially the last 20 years, it is amazing. And it's amazing because the country is very water scarce, probably one of the most water scarce countries of the world.
Due to its small size, Singapore lacks the space to store the rainwater that falls on the island. In terms of water scarcity, it is on par with some of the driest countries in the world. Ironically, flooding was a problem for Singapore over 2 decades ago.
Well, this project actually was conceived in about 1985 as part of a flood study that dealt with the Bukit Canal in Singapore and some of the flooding that existed in the low-lying areas of Little India and Chinatown.
Controlling tide levels that threatened low-lying areas was the objective.
From that came the concept of building a barrage, a dam across the mouth of Marina Channel here, and effectively isolating those areas from high tides.
The introduction of recycling technology opened new frontiers in water sourcing.
If you look at conventional water engineering, most water catchments will be probably in a very pristine part of an island or of land. But when it comes from highly urbanized catchment, it will pose for the water engineers a special challenge. Membrane technology, for example, can be used to actually treat the water here.
Urban runoff will be improved to fully potable standards. the Marina Barrage would create Singapore's first reservoir in the city.
The water supply of Singapore in some ways is not that different, at least the objective not that different compared to what we saw in ancient times in cities like Constantinople.
creating a new source of drinking water. The reservoir is relatively small at 240 hectares, but its catchment area is about 1/6 the size of the entire island. That's a lot of water flowing into the basin. 9 steel crest gates hold back 9.5 million cubic meters of water. When a surge occurs during a storm event, the crest gates are released to allow excess rainwater to be discharged into the sea.
Each of these gates are designed crest shape, like a fish belly pond, right? It is hollow inside. That would help when we are operating the gates because it does not require that kind of force. It's lighter and it's buoyant, so the amount of force to be applied when we are opening the gate is much reduced.
2 hydraulic arms press each crest gate down to release the water in the reservoir. But this can only take place during low tide, when the sea level is lower than the water level within the reservoir. The Marina Barrage pump station has 6 high-capacity pumps installed, with a 7th on standby.
If we are caught in the unique or the unusual circumstance of a high tide concurrent with a storm event, and this catchment is so urban and the runoff is so fast, the peak storm event reaches the reservoir within about 20 minutes of the peak of the rainfall. So things happen quickly. Then we start the pumps, and we pump water at up to 240 cubic meters a second.
This technology enables each pump to drain an Olympic-sized swimming pool in a minute. In antiquity, the Romans were at the forefront of their technology. The Byzantine Empire was responsible for arguably the longest Roman water supply line ever seen in history.
Now standing right at the major crossroads in the centre of modern Istanbul. This lovely valley that runs beneath us is the most convenient crossing point from north to south. And you can see on either side we have these 2 hills here, and crossing the valley in between them is the aqueduct of Valens, which runs in from a higher level from one part of Constantine's city to a lower part of Constantine's city. So all aqueducts are gravity fed to a certain extent. The big problem with an aqueduct is that you can't turn it off. Now what this means is that you can't have too steep a slope, otherwise the water comes down, you can't control it. But if you have too shallow a slope, then it can dry up in the summer and become stagnant. So it does need a lot of very careful surveying. And when this aqueduct, the aqueduct of Valens, was first built, the course it actually followed is about 185 kilometers. So they had to build it round valleys and through hills, tunnel it through hills in places to keep a good gradient all the way through. Wonderful piece of engineering.
water pressure too was a concern for the builders of Singapore's Marina Barrage. At a cost of almost $140 million, construction began in 2005. Engineers from Singapore's Public Utilities Board worked closely with consultants and contractors.
Well, the biggest challenge we faced in the installation of the crest gate was the accuracy of construction that was required for us, the tolerance that we had to meet the specifications.
The piers of the barrage could not be more than 2 millimeters out of line.
Otherwise, we'll have a problem fitting the gates into the piers. That would mean also severe leakage.
Each steel crest gate weighs about 70 tons.
We use a 400-ton floating crane to install these gates between the piers. Again, there was another part that was very challenging because these gates are pivoted. There are 9 pivots on each gate. And at the bottom of the piers there, the base concrete slab, are also these pivots. Each of these pivots has to be aligned correctly. If any of them were aligned more than 2 millimeters even, we would have a problem slotting in all those pins between each of these pivots.
Precision was also a factor during the installation of the 50-ton pumps.
If it's not aligned correctly, it could vibrate like a washing machine. But the problem here is more severe than that. If excessive vibration happens, it affects the structure of the building there, the pump house itself. So again, we had to make sure that the pump was installed correctly. Its alignment was very important. I'm glad to say again, all were constructed accordingly and none of them vibrated like a washing machine.
The builders of the Basilica system were early recyclers.
A lot of the material used in the building of the Basilica system was reused material. A lot of it was especially made for the system. This is one of the nicest pieces of the reused material. It's a sculptured head of the goddess Medusa. We can date this head of Medusa to approximately the 2nd or 3rd century from the way the eyes have been carved. And we can recognize her as Medusa because out of her hair we have these wonderful snake's head which come out ready to terrify anybody who approached her. By the end of the 4th century, by the year 395, the Emperor Theodosius had effectively banned all pagan temples in Constantinople and the Roman Empire. And at that time they became state property, and many of them were demolished. And so pieces like this would have been available for reuse in Justinian's Basilica system. Pieces of sculpture like this, of course, were probably felt as having a magical quality to them. So one way of destroying that, reflecting the evil eye, deflecting it from you, reducing the power, would be to destroy it, to smash it or something like that. But in this particular case, it seems they decided to place it upside down. That ends the power of the goddess.
Fed by the Hadrianic Aqueduct, scholars believe that the origins of the waters in the Basilica system came from an area known as the Forest of Belgrade. The remains seen today are mostly from the Ottoman period of the 16th century or later. Much of the original Roman or Byzantine masonry buried or hidden by time. For Singapore's Public Utilities Board, traditional reservoirs with their pristine catchment areas still play an important role in the provision of drinking water. But these are now joined by a new generation of reservoir, where instead of trees, the landscape is made up of 21st century skyscrapers.
Singapore is now trying to make Marina Bay not only a water supply for domestic industrial purposes, but also recreation, tourism, and lifestyle purposes. So this is what is impressive of the Marina Bay, that it is integrated into the living pattern of the city.
Over the next few years, the new freshwater Marina Bay will become the centerpiece of Singapore's urban transformation. Already under construction, new developments spearheaded by Singapore's Urban Redevelopment Authority aim to focus attention towards waterfront living.
All of the development around Marina Bay really looks at the river. It doesn't turn its back to the river or the bay. That's the focus.
Reservoirs will no longer be considered off-limits to the population they sustain.
This is unquestionably, in the 21st century, it's a way to go, not only for Singapore, but also for other parts of the world.
Active participation and enjoyment of the activities in and around it is now encouraged. The long-term survival of any city is dependent on the provision of one of life's most basic necessities. And in Singapore, with the implementation of innovation and technology, water security is now assured.